Welcome back to another episode of the My Latin Life podcast. My Latin Life since 2014 has been your trusted guide to traveling and living in Latin America. Today, I'm joined by a special guest. Her name is Han Talbot, and she's the host of her own podcast, The Remote Life. So I'm happy to be joined by her today. Han, how's it going?
Hello, that was a fabulous intro. I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. I first came across your presence and everything on Twitter, and I saw that you were kind of connected with all these different travel bloggers, both in the Americas and in Europe. Um, Funny, I did originally record an episode with Jen Ruiz,
Oh,
who I think you've connected with in the past,
yeah.
or we tried to record, and the I was in this. Kind of crappy Airbnb in Puerto Vallarta, and my Wi-Fi just like made it unusable. So the episode never made it to the light of day. So I'm really happy to have
Oh,
you on. Well,
thank
and so I'm
you.
happy to have you on because I think you'll probably be our first female guest, and I'm trying
Mm.
to have a concerted effort to highlight more women digital nomads and have more women on the show and stuff. So maybe you can help me with that down the line. But
We are out there, I
yeah,
promise.
yeah, I hope so. And yeah, so that's something I'm working on. But yeah, we're talking a bit offline. My Latin Life, it's all about digital nomads and people working and living and interested in Latin America, trying to learn more about the different countries, where are good spots to work online, things like that. From kind of everything on the fun side of things to getting into like advanced topics as well, generating income and all that. So, in this episode, we can kind of talk about um, how to actually, start making income as a freelancer, as someone working online, because that's really the first step before most people can move to Latin America. You know, obviously you could, be a dive instructor or English teacher or something like that, but I don't know. My vibe is personally, I think it's better to earn the quid, earn dollars, earn euros, and then spend pesos, and kind of move to these less expensive places, and save money and basically ball out and enjoy life.
So you took the dream there. Well, I think my perspective on it is that I think to give you a little bit of background about me, I did a study abroad in Brazil back in 2013. Happened to coincide with the World Cup. People always ask me, and I figured that I missed a flight when because I used to live in a tiny little island in the south of Brazil, and
Hmm.
I was on my way back from London at one point, and I missed a flight in Sao Paulo and realised, oh my gosh, I can sit in Sao Paulo airport and connect to Wi-Fi and do my like dissertation, because my university at the time was like one of the only universities that got you to do your dissertation while you were doing your study abroad. And I was like, oh my gosh, imagine, like, this is just incredible. I could be working, doing wherever I fancy, like from wherever I want in the world. And that kind of stuck with me afterwards. Was that because I then moved to London, as a lot of us Brits tend to after we finish university. And I could see the digital nomad movement, if you like, starting to take off, like for
Hmm.
real. And I was kind of thinking, yeah, this is a bit of me. Someone once said to me, "Oh, you'd be great in a corporate environment," and I don't think that person and I talk anymore. So it's like I cannot work in the same four walls, looking at the same four walls 5 days a week. And so for me, the big push and like the big kind of draw towards remote life really stemmed from feeling and just changing up my environment all the time, and or
Hmm.
at least a bit more routinely than going into a fixed office 5 days a week. And so from there, it was less about picking specific countries, although I still would pick specific countries based off on where I personally enjoy going, and how, speaking the language always helps.
Hmm.
But it would be less. I think for me, it's about, okay, I'd rather create my dollars, as if you will, to fit the place I want to go versus where's the cheapest place I can go. is my
Hmm.
kind of approach.
Yeah, it's definitely not about the cheapest, at least from my perspective, but more about just sort of getting a good value for your money.
Mm,
Um, yeah, I do want to get a little bit more of your story. By the way, I was actually in the UK just this past October, November.
mm.
And I went down to Torquay. Went down to Plymouth. I was in London for a while. I went up to Manchester and up to the Yorkshire Dales. So yeah,
In
little
winter,
connection there.
wow, that's so brave.
Yeah, it was slippery. But you know what? It's interesting. So you went to Florianopolis, Brazil, while you were still in university, right?
Yes,
So that must have been quite eye-opening at the time. You know, you had alluded to that you had trained and studied for maybe a specific career and a specific skill set. And going to Brazil was probably a really, really eye-opening experience for a university student.
it was. I was on a podcast back in December, and they were like, "Okay, so like, how did you prepare? Like, what was it like?" And I was just like, "How long have you got?" Like, because it, yeah, especially back. So I, yeah, 2013, so that's nearly 10 years ago. Um, the internet was not what it was today, what it is today, even. So preparing for a culture that is very drastically different from what I know, and in a continent that didn't speak a lot of English at the time as well. It's quite for someone who's just learning a language as well, because I'd obviously done a bit of Portuguese at university, but it's just not quite the same as when you then get thrown into both the language full time and then also the culture. Nothing can quite fully prepare you for that shift. Coupled with the fact that they were obviously then at the time building up to the World Cup as well, it was all a very big, different experience at 20 years old. Um, but that then gave me like that's how I got introduced to content creation, and that's how I then like pivoted to where I'm at now because I realized okay, maybe I'm not. There isn't as much information for me to see. Why don't I then be that person who creates that information? So that's kind of where I pivoted because I
Hmm.
picked a languages degree because I'd been speaking Spanish as a second language since I was a small child anyway. But then
Oh,
I
well.
just loved language learning. I was that kid in school that just I wasn't good at maths, I wasn't good at science, but I was good at languages. So that's kind of what I picked for my career path. And then you get to university and people are going, "Oh, so what? You want to become a teacher? No. You want to become a translator? No." All these different bits and pieces that people kind of expected you to go into at the time, and I wanted to do none of it. Even down to, oh, you could go do a corporate job. Yeah, sounds nice, but nah. So then I picked up doing blogging and content while I was on my year abroad as well, while dealing with all these things. And yeah, I remember I thought I was so cool and on trend doing a lime green font for my website. But yeah, that's where I really started kind of seeing what the possibility of social media and content creation from there, while also dealing with the fun of a new culture.
Yeah.
It wasn't too waffly.
And what was it about? What were some of the things about Brazil that really struck you as different about where you came from?
It's funny to try and think about it now because I got so used to it and I actually love it. But I remember as a 20-year-old going into a new culture like that, I think some of the biggest things for me were just kind of just some of the mannerisms a lot of the time, just how kind of people were with a, a big thing normally, of course, would have been the fact that like the stereotypes people associate with Brits, for example, the kind of and especially at the time, like the first thing I just arrived and the first thing they said to me was, so what do you think about the fact that Prince George has just been born? And I was like, he's born, congratulations, like, and they expect me to have a whole opinion about it. It's another day for us Brits. It doesn't matter. That kind of thing. And that I should have and they thought that if I didn't have tea at 4 p.m. in the afternoon, then I must be going crazy. Like, it was just these funny little stereotypes that were put on top of my head. And then I think this is the thing, I can't quite describe it, but I think it's just change in pace of lifestyle as well, especially in Florianopolis. Like they have a whole like kind of word to describe this kind of lifestyle in Portuguese, devagar, and it literally is kind of this combination of like slow, not going anywhere fast kind of feeling, and that was Florianopolis for me. It was like coming from a place in the UK where like everything's very efficient, everything's kind of generally done on time. You can kind of expect things to be completed. To Brazil, where it was like it'll happen when it happens. Like life will happen when it happens. The bus will turn up when it does. Like it was just such a very different pace of life in that respect.
Hmm.
Yeah, and of course, you're surrounded by beaches. Like, I do that. I'm not saying it's bad at all, but of course, like when you're surrounded by an island of beautiful beaches, I don't really think you can really expect things to be fast paced.
Hmm.
But it was, yeah, things like that. Which now, looking back on it, I'm like, what, what was I thinking? That was great. But I think at the time, I just found that quite confronting because I'd never quite experienced something like that. But now I'm like, that's exactly what I'm aiming for. Like, I want to be in a place where like I can go to the beach and like chill when I want to, and people just live. I think that's what it was. It was like you're going to a place where people just want to chill, live. Like it's all good vibes. Like,
Hmm.
does
And
that
so
kind of
that
make sense?
first, it does. And so that first trip to Floripa was, I guess, a full semester, or how long were you down there?
Yeah. So I was there for a year in total.
Oh wow,
Yeah.
not bad.
Yeah, I can't complain. It was definitely it was confronting for someone who is kind of away from family for the first time properly ever and whatnot in a different culture. But I'm still very glad I did it, and I knew going into it that I'd be glad that I did it, if that makes sense as well, because I wanted something that was very different from life in Europe. That was my big thing, and it's still something that I talk about so much with people nowadays. So it was, yeah, different, confronting, but it's still one of the best experiences I've done in my life.
And so now, all these years later, I imagine you probably spend some time in Portugal. Do you keep the Brazilian accent, or have you adapted to Portuguese from Portugal?
I do. I keep the accent as much as possible, and they always ask me, "Are you Brazilian?" So I then feel like, I'm doing okay. I try not to because there are some differences, obviously, between European Portuguese and Brazilian Portuguese. Like there are certain words that mean like they literally are the same word technically, but they mean two different things in
Hmm.
European and Brazilian Portuguese. And then they also do verbs slightly different, but that's then where I get like, oh, well, you're Brazilian, you don't sound Portuguese. And I try to make sure I don't let it slip as much as possible. That's one of those little pride things. Like I spent long enough learning it and getting it right that I don't want to change it.
Nice. Okay, good. So you kept this sotaque brasileiro.
Claro.
Um, um, I think what's interesting about how you got into online business and building a blog and online presence is that you came from a linguistics background, right?
Mm,
I think that would be accurate to say. And so you knew that you wanted to learn foreign languages, which basically meant that you were going to have to live in foreign countries and you were going to have to find a way to make that work, to basically earn a living, live in foreign countries and sort of support this lifestyle, this international lifestyle. And so you managed to find your way into, I guess, first blogging because you wanted to share what you were learning. And you found that there was like a niche or an empty space where there was a need for content that you were looking for. So you're kind of serving your own need. Um, how were you able to basically start monetizing? How quickly were you starting to sort of see sort of positive results and feedback and growth, and sort of how have things sort of taken off from like a business perspective?
yeah. So again, it's a funny one. So I did content because I love content. I was like that person in university that everyone was like, "Oh my god, you're always on Facebook or you're always taking pictures." Like before we kind of understood it. Um, And so yeah, I created this blog, and I thought I literally said to a friend when I was on my year abroad, I'm gonna create a career from social media. Didn't know how, but I remember watching like the likes of Zoella, Fun for Louis, and all these guys back in the day, and thinking, right, that's what I want to do. But so what I did was I started. So I got my first job out of university using social media. Like I literally kind of went through even my full time career for the first couple of years out of university using social media and using my website, building skills, if you will, I say in like inverted commas, because yeah, my first website build was not great at all. But just instead of going down the kind of traditional CV route, I would build up my social profile so that I could be like, look, this is what I'm capable of doing. Uh,
Hmm.
I can create a website more or less, and it got better. Obviously, I would hope you've seen it yourself over the years. And just going instead of going down the content creator route, I went down the marketer route instead, which people are always surprised about. But yeah, so I started going in different marketing roles specifically because I like social media. I like kind of seeing where this could go. I then started really loving strategy, so I did a mixture. I went from marketing to SEO to PR, and yeah, ended up basically in events. So then back in 2019, I then thought, this is where I then come back to, no, I like doing things on my own terms and working wherever I like too much
Hmm.
to keep going in working from offices. So in 2019, I said, right, I'm going freelance. Jumped probably before I was completely ready, but still one of the best decisions I've made to this day, especially during the pandemic. People were like, oh my gosh, like, how do you feel? This must feel so bad. No, it was still one of the best decisions I could have made ever because I had being on off remote working in my full time jobs anyway. I got permission from different people, done projects based on remote work. That yeah, that was then where I really thought, no, I want to do a job where not only I'm working on my own terms, but then therefore, as a consequence, creating better results because I'm working in a better, like a much better environment for myself. Um,
Hmm.
and all my skills essentially kind of just seem to work in creative project management very well. So from there, I just started doing again, doing different. Essentially, my first kind of full time contract, I still negotiated remote working, and so from there, I did like half and half while I still lived in the UK. And obviously, then the pandemic rolled around, and remote working became a lot more kind of easy to do for different people. So yeah, a lot of my income largely comes from full time client work or part time client work mostly, and that's kind of how I built it from there. Um, Rather than spending money on things as well, I saved a lot of money as much as possible during our lockdowns, so that I then had a good buffer when we came out of it too, just in case. Like not because I expect anything bad to happen, but just have it there so that I can take time off if I want to, and just to do like day to day projects as well.
Hmm. And I imagine this maybe allowed you to stop commuting into the city, something like that, live in a one thing I noticed about the UK is the countryside was just so nice. And I
Yeah,
was like,
I saved so much money from even doing half a week commuting into London. It was rather insane in the end, especially looking at my like, wish list that I built up over the years. Um, but yeah, no, I lived in I moved back to my parents' house for the pandemic just to obviously be with family as a lot of people did. And yeah, having the English have you seen the film The Holiday with Cameron Diaz?
I've seen like the first 15 minutes, yeah.
So the cottage that she stays in, I was based in the village next to where that is filmed. For
I do know you're talking about. I do know you're talking about the cottage. Yeah.
yeah, so that cottage obviously doesn't really actually exist in real life, but where lots of that is filmed was where I was staying during the pandemic. So yeah, had the hills, had like yeah, lots of space, which I am very thankful for during that period.
Okay. I'm sure any of your friends listening might want to know what part of the UK you're from, if you mind sharing that.
Of course, I if you've not picked up on the accent, I'm from Surrey, which is south of London.
Okay, cool. And so there's like train, like it's like I know the trains into London are like it goes far. It goes there's like hour-long trains
Yeah, so
and
I
all
think
that.
my nearest one was always half an hour, so from Guildford, which
Mhm.
is on a line from Portsmouth, which I think is a couple hours. And I never used to envy the people who would get the 5 a.m. train from Portsmouth all the way into London every day. Oof.
And another thing I noticed in London when I was there was I was really surprised by how big the Brazilian community is in
Mm,
London. I didn't realize that it's like literally like 100,000 plus strong. And it's
yeah.
probably one of the biggest in Europe. There was a big one in Dublin when I was there, a big community in London, and obviously a big community in Portugal. And it was in, there's an area of London called Baywater, I believe, that
Mm-hmm.
they call Brazil Water,
Oh, how funny.
and yeah, and I was over there and I was talking to some people, and they said that a lot of people they either have Portuguese or Italian ancestry, and they sort of got that Italian ancestry passport, and then they decided to, obviously come over to Europe, but they didn't want to be in Portugal, they wanted to be in an English speaking place to, learn English and make more money and sort of have that different experience. And that's why there's a lot of Brazilians in London and in Dublin.
Yeah, there's a lot of pockets of Latin American communities in London. I think you have to kind of do a little bit of an extra search to find it a lot of the time. So there are two markets as well that, again, I don't know what they're like post pandemic, but when I lived in London, there was one in Elephant and Castle that was quite big as well, near the mall. And then there was also I think it was literally called the Latin American Market near Seven Sisters, which is a bit north London. And again, you'd literally walk in, and it was just all you'd hear was Spanish and Portuguese. And like, I remember I took a old housemate, and I was like gushing. I was like, "Oh my god, I can get all these things without paying crazy like export tax and all the rest of it." And he was like, "Okay, Han, cool." And like, get coffee for like, £2 and it'll blow your head off. It was just like proper strong Colombian coffee. And yeah,
Oh, I'm sure.
there are pockets, but I will admit that I've had to do searches in both Spanish and Portuguese at times to actually find some of those things. But they're there, and yeah.
And by the way, you said you've been speaking Spanish since a young kid. I mean, how did that come about?
Yeah, so I mean, I was again that kid that my mom used to stick me in front of good old VHSs back in the day, but we were on our like once a year holiday to Spain, and I was like, "Mum, I'm gonna be fluent in Spanish." That was me at like 6 7 years old. We then actually happened to move to Spain when I was a kid, so yeah, we were there when I was 10 to 14. Yeah, stuck me in Spanish schools, so I became fluent by 13 14.
Okay, that's
Good life
awesome.
skills. Good life skills.
Yeah, the Brits in Spain is a strong community.
Love a bit of Costa del action, so Costa del Sol action even. Yeah.
For sure. And to give people a little bit better idea, I'm sure there's people where, we're trying to inspire them to work online and they're just trying to think like, what can I actually do online to earn money? How do I get clients? I'm sure you've come across a lot of these really common questions. So like when you say that you do freelancing, I imagine it's like and social media stuff. Like what are you doing? Are you doing SEO and copywriting, or are you doing sort of like paid acquisition and ad spend, or like what specific segment do you specialize in?
So that's the beauty about creative project management is that I can do a very big range. But so for people who are looking to get into it, I would say that the best thing to do is to pick one or two skills that you are good at and you can sell well and you can put on a portfolio and show your results. So whether that's social media management, if that's SEO, if that's strategy, whatever that is, pick something that you know you're good at and you enjoy doing and can sell well yourself. You can pitch to clients because
Hmm.
especially in the early days, it takes effort, it takes some time, and you won't get people flocking to you straight away until you've built that kind of built up your network so people know who you are and what you do, but built up your results. So For me, a lot of it was putting out on LinkedIn, putting up on my LinkedIn, I've done this. It was about showing off the press coverage I've got. It was about showing the different social media posts that I've done and the results from that. So,
Hmm.
and for me, that's to answer your question originally as well. So I do a mixture. So again, I started off with project management for events. Well, this was pre-pandemic for events and influence marketing campaigns. Then went into virtual events with the pandemic. Some of it was social media strategy, and it just has been a big mix of that basically since. So, like I worked with a company to launch another campaign again last year. That was project management, but again, it's social media. I'm working with a client on TikTok strategy at the moment. It varies. It really varies.
Hmm. And so let's say we have someone listening to this that sort of works in the tech industry in social media or one of these skills that's quite common to start building a freelance business around. So be it copywriting, SEO, whatever, social media management. What would your biggest recommendations and advice be to that person for them to start working freelance, getting clients, and maybe like keeping sticky clients that
Mm.
it's not just like short term projects, but something that's maybe a bit more recurring revenue.
I'm going to kind of answer your question, but not answer your question, just because of kind of how I've seen the freelance space move. The best advice I can give at the moment is figure out first why it is you want to go freelance. Figure out why it is you want to remote work. Like that's because a lot of people will go, "Oh, it looks like your life is so easy." I'm like, "Cool, okay. If I've convinced you my life looks easy, then I've done a very good job, quite frankly." I'm not saying my life's not easy, but it takes effort. It requires effort. Some of the easiest looking things, like there's a joke in the content creation industry that if something looks easy, there's normally a lot of effort that's gone into it. But that's the point. Um, so if you're just looking for a life on the beach every now and again, I'd maybe rethink why it is you're going freelance. So if you're looking for a kind of whole different setup and lifestyle, then you're already winning. So I would say figure out your why and figure out what it is you're actually wanting from the lifestyle first. Because not enough people really think about it and whether they're willing to commit to it. It's not a problem to have a full time job and work in an office. It's just and go on occasional beach holidays. That's so cool. But yeah, you've got to kind of have a really honest conversation with yourself first. I would then say that again, it could go either of two ways. You can either do what I did, which is build up a buffer of money and then start pitching to clients, but that's quite risky. Or you
Hmm.
can start trying to find clients while you're potentially in full time education or full time work now and start building that roster on the side. Another obviously great option that we have now, having had the pandemic where we've all been remote working for a lot of it, is that you can ask your employer now. A lot of employers are actually quite open to remote working. I saw like Monzo, for example, is actually allowed like going one step further and actually allowing companies to take time off to go do projects and travel and all the rest of it. So
Hmm.
I would say have a honest conversation with yourself first and then see what route it is that you want to take. I knew for me that I wanted to be traveling and I wanted to be able to build my work and build my money around my lifestyle rather than be needing to go to an office all the time. But that's not for everybody. It's really not for everybody. So yeah, I think that I kind of answer your question, but not.
No, I think people will find that helpful. Personally, moving to remote work was the most impactful thing I've ever
Mm,
done. I mean, I'm here in Cabo San Lucas, Mexico right now, and just this morning I woke up before the sunrise. I ran down to the beach, and it was like a full moon, super moon
mm,
last night. And so I had the super moon setting over the mountains on one side. I had the sun rising over the ocean on the
mm,
other side. You could see both at the same time, looking over the whole bay of Cabo San Lucas, and it was so epic.
mm,
And that would have been impossible if I was working in an office back
mm.
in Canada or another cold city. in March.
No, for sure, and that's something that motivates me as well. That's yeah. I was in Split in Croatia for a month, and I love the fact that I could literally. I was like, right, I need a break from work, so I literally 3 minutes out the door, and I was on the beach. That for me was
Hmm.
just the best thing ever. But I think a lot of people don't quite realize that it's not all beaches and sunrises and supermoons. Like there is a little bit more to it.
Definitely. I know you are kind of short on time, but I wanted to ask, so what inspired you to start the podcast? Your
Sure.
podcast being The Remote Life. So wanted to plug that a bit. And so what inspired you to start it? And how's it been going? And what's the future hold for the podcast?
Yeah, so I worked in the content creation. Well, so I've been in the content creation community in and out for the best part of 9 years at this point. And I think a big thing that I was noticing was the fact that obviously we had the digital nomad movement. Then we kind of had remote working already sort of building up already. And what I was kind of noticing from the space was that we had kind of this gap really in the community where there was some really great people who had some really great stories and we weren't really talking about it because as you and I know, like remote working, remote life is actually super tangible if you really want it. It's such a tangible thing. But there weren't really these stories being heard, and sort of just more awareness of like different nomad communities, and just yeah, that all those kind of wonderful stories basically that I was like, I want to tell them. I want to tell them. So the remote life was born out of being able to answer questions that I wasn't seeing answered, and also telling stories that I knew were there and available to be heard from different travel bloggers, from people who are building businesses while being based somewhere, but also being remote workers. So it was just that kind of thing. Um, and then the future is that honestly, I'm just kind of rolling with it at the moment, seeing where it goes. But I have got a couple ideas, and I think I don't know. I don't want to say too much because I have this habit of being like, yeah, your ideas, and then yeah, not always being able to do them quite in the way I'd like to. So future is series 3 is already underway, and we've got our first collab happening in Mexico City in April. So that's going to be exciting.
What's
And
that?
then, pardon,
What's that collab?
collaboration. Yep,
Okay, what's happening in Mexico City?
you're going to have to stay tuned.
Okay, well, I'm in Mexico. I'll be in Mexico in April, so let me know if what's
Come
going
out,
on.
come hang out in Mexico City. Going to be in Mexico City for 5 weeks. Come hang out.
I definitely could.
Do it.
And
But yeah, no. So
yeah,
I want to build up on that. Sorry, just to actually not go off on a massive tangent, but yeah, I want to build that up, and I'm hoping to build that into more of a business and brand in its own right.
definitely. I know what you mean about everyone having a story and there being a lot of stories out there. I mean, I visited a lot of the digital nomad hubs in Latin America, and what I've noticed is that every single person basically has like a totally different way of making money, a totally different business,
Mm,
totally different industry. And what's weird is like we're all together, we're, going for beers together and this and that, but
mm.
we're all like working on completely separate things. Um,
My favorite thing was going to Split, and so being an events planner by trade, I was like, I'm gonna like just see who's around for a drink and whatnot. It ended up being like this event of like 20 people with our own set menu. In the end, it was fantastic. But one of my favorite conversations was that I sat down, I just got to know these people for 5 minutes, and someone went, "So taxes?" And rather like on a normal conversation, people would be like, "What?" But I was like, do you know what? This is interesting to know. I have no idea, but I want to be able to like hear about like how you do your taxes and how different people do it. I loved having those random conversations that you can only have with a certain few people. It was great, really good fun.
Yeah, definitely a lot of smart people out there. And I think what's happening right now in some of these digital nomad remote worker communities is a lot of new ideas are being formed because this whole remote work thing
Mm,
is barely 10 years old. You could argue it kind of started with Tim Ferriss and the 4 Hour Work Week, which I think came out in 2009. But really only started like really taking form, I feel, in like maybe 2015. And so when I'm in Medellin or Playa del Carmen or, whatever it is in Europe, um, we're coming up with a lot of these ideas around community and co-working and co-living and different things like that for the first time. And it really has a really interesting energy in the same way where, maybe New York in the 80s was a point in time, or San Francisco in the 1960s was a point in time, or, London in the whatever, the Beatles era or something. I feel like, right now, like what's happening in some of these digital nomad communities is one of those like really special point in times that you just got to be there for.
Absolutely. I think if you can, and if it's on your mind, this is what I said about doing study abroad back in December. I was like, if you've got the itch, scratch it. Like, it's some of the biggest things I hear is that people, and even when we just come out of the pandemic and I was heading off to travel back in October, so many people they would say also, like, for example, when I sold my car, someone was like, "Oh, so why are you selling your car now?" And I was like, "Because I'm going traveling." And they would say, "Oh, that's the one thing I regret in my life." I heard that so often, like, "Oh, good for you, like go travel, go see the world." Like, that's the one thing that I regret. And I think if you are also feeling that way inclined and you think you've got the kind of determination to make it happen, do it.
Hmm.
Like, there is, yeah, it's like I said, it's one of the best decisions I've made in my life. One of the best decisions I've made in my life. Um, yeah, if you got it, if you want to go do it, do it.
What have been some of your favorite spots?
Oof. Definitely check out Split. Potentially, possibly in more of the summer though, just because obviously it's shut for a lot of for half the year. Split was amazing. Lisbon, love Lisbon.
Hmm.
Definitely, yeah, one of my favorites. I'm looking forward to Mexico City. I think I would love to go back to Florianopolis because obviously at the time I was just sitting with like my pen and paper. This was like kind of pre-Wi-Fi being too widely available. But I think there's even a Selena in Florianopolis now.
There is, yeah.
Yeah, I would love to go back there. I enjoy. Do you know what? I enjoy so many of the different places that I go. I mean, again, Bali, like classic. Um,
Hmm.
I don't think there's been any places that I've been that I've not enjoyed. That sounds really cheesy,
Hmm.
but I think, yeah, again, anywhere that you can, especially go meet up with different people who are like-minded and have events, I've always enjoyed. So yeah, again, that's Bali, Lisbon. Oh, actually, Ljubljana was good. Slovenia, that was amazing as well. Have
I've
skiing,
heard good
40 minutes
things.
out. Yeah, 40 minutes out of the city, go skiing. That was really fun.
That's awesome. I do know that you want to get wrapping up. So with the little bit of time that we have left, is there anything that you would like to promote or plug from the projects and everything that you're working on?
How kind. So I mean, yeah, come hang out on the remote life. Obviously, want to check out Handmaid's World as well. That'd be amazing. But no, come and check out the remote life for people who are aspiring, but also current remote lifers. There are some amazing people. I'm not saying that just to blow my own trumpet. Like, I genuinely, absolutely love every single guest that I have had the opportunity to speak to. So yeah, I think come and hang out in Mexico City, people. Obviously.
I'm down. I'm down. Oh, and one last question. I literally wrote this down to ask you. How did you get Nomadic Matt on your show so early on? That's incredible.
Matt, so he basically I think he came to one of my events back in London because I used to work for an influence marketing company who also did events, and I was their project manager for one of their London events. But yeah, him and I got chatting in Mallorca. So we went to one of their events back in Mallorca in November, and yeah, him and I got chatting and asked if he'd join. He was great, bless him.
That's amazing. Yeah, you definitely seem to be a really good networker. And so, hopefully we can work together on some stuff in the future. Maybe I can come on your podcast, or you can kind of help me again, like I said, get more women on the podcast and share their stories here on My Latin Life.
Come check out people on Facebook. This is another thing. Check out Facebook groups. Check out people on Instagram. People on Twitter always want to have a chat as well. We're all out there. There are so many networking opportunities, and people are always up for meeting like-minded people. So we're out there. There are so many people to go and chat to as well. Travel content events are out there as well. But it literally takes it's the funniest thing that I get asked is like, oh, what courses did you do, or like what. I'm like, didn't do courses. I didn't do courses. I use a little thing called Google. And people are like, what? So check out Google, do what you need to do, come hang out, like you said, have a couple beers with people that you. And the world itself and this community is a lot smaller than it looks. Everyone knows everyone, so just come hang out.
It's true. Pretty much every podcast guest I've had knows at least one of the other guests, so it's kind of just like
Yeah.
a chain.
I literally went to Split not expecting to like have any kind of connection to anybody, and I read, yeah, literally within one day, I was like, "How do you know this person?" So we all know each other.
Amazing. And Han, but I didn't mention this, but when we do end the recording, don't like immediately exit your browser. Just stay on the line for a sec. But with that being said, yeah, I just wanted to thank you so much for this conversation. Thank you for joining us on an episode of the My Latin Life podcast. This has been a fun one. Hearing from someone's experiences, coming from Europe, coming from a different background, and all that. And I hope this has inspired people.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, it's been fun to chat about all things remote life, which I love.
Absolutely. And hopefully we can make Mexico City happen. We'll see.
Mexico City, make it happen.
All right. All right. Bye for now.